Welcome to our second Hazards Webinar Wednesday and part 2 of our Insurance Basics, What Texans Need to Know. Last week we held part 1 with speakers from Texas Department of Insurance, Office for Public Insurance Counsel, Texas Windstorm Insurance Agency, and had a Texas State climatologist that joined us to chat about locally relevant climate information and predictions for the future. So we are recording all of these webinars to share with the public after the fact. So if you are unable to attend, I highly encourage you to find Texas Sea Grant through Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube page to get all of our latest videos, because we'll be posting up all of our hazards webinars on those pages. Our Hazards Webinar Wednesday series will be a fixture throughout the 2021 hurricane season. So our future webinars will cover other topics related to disaster preparedness, such as building codes, ordinances, avoiding contractor fraud, and the recovery phase. So we will hold future webinars as of now in June, August, and October on the second Wednesday of the month. So please join us for all those future webinars. My name is Ashley Bennis. I am a coastal planning specialist with Texas Sea Grant, and we're housed at Texas A&M University across the coast. So I'm a part of a Community Resilience Collaborative, a research and extension-based coastal planning program that combines the reach and resources of 2 Texas A&M University programs, Texas Sea Grant and Texas Target Communities. My other team members are joining me today. We have Walter Peacock, who's located in Harris County, and he's doing all the background magic with audio and video, and we'll be introducing our speakers. We also have Kate DeGennaro, who is located in Brownsville, and she'll be running the question and answer portion of this webinar. And we also have our natural resource specialist, Morgan Ayers, who's also located in Corpus Christi, and she'll be monitoring the Q&A chat box and responding to questions, and she does work all along the coast. So the series was born from a conversation we had with multiple people that were in the process of buying homes and looking for insurance, and really confused about what they needed, what their risks were, and who they should reach out to. So it seemed important to try and provide as much information about how best to prepare your property and your family for the possibility of disaster. Because we live in a high-risk zone, and I think anyone who's lived here for a few years knows that and realizes that every year we have to think about this and recollect our thoughts as far as how to be better prepared. So we have partnered with a number of state and federal local agencies and organizations to bring you resources and hopefully answer some of your pressing questions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Walter to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Ashley. First up is Krista Lopez. She's a Deputy Director and Chief of Staff for Community Development and Revitalization within the Texas GLO. In this role, she oversees operation programs and coordinates staffing for the CDR.
Hello, everyone. My name is Krista Lopez, and I work for the Texas General Land Office. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the disaster recovery aid that may be available following an event, and also the importance of carrying homeowner or renter's insurance. I'm going to share my screen here, so please bear with me. There we go. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about who the General Land Office is and what we offer, as well as the importance of disaster or homeowners insurance or renters insurance in the wake of a disaster. So who's the Texas General Land Office? Who is this GLO that everyone talks about? Well, we're the oldest state agency in Texas. People often refer to us as the GLO. And we manage state lands, we operate the Alamo, we help Texans and Texas recover from disasters. The GLO also helps to fund public education through the Permanent School Fund. And then we also provide benefits to Texas veterans, and we manage the entire Texas coast. The area I work with within the GLO is called Community Development and Revitalization, or CDR. And what we do is we're the ones that help facilitate the management of the federal funds that are available to Texas and Texans recovering from a disaster. Those funds come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or referred to as HUD. So HUD provides federal funds to states following disaster events when a particular event is warranted for those federal funds. This doesn't happen every disaster. There can be a FEMA declaration for a disaster, which the Texas Division of Emergency Management works with, or there can be a HUD allocation as well that usually comes several years later. However, there can be a FEMA declaration without HUD funds, but we can't get HUD funds without that FEMA declaration. I know it's a little confusing, but unfortunately that's how it plays out. So what type of programs do we offer at the GLO for disaster recovery? Well, we offer programs for individuals, both households and renters. And then we also offer services for local governments. Possible programs that we offer for households or renters are single-family home reconstruction and rehabilitation, reimbursement programs, or affordable rental or multifamily programs. For local jurisdictions, we may be able to assist with the funds that they have to match for FEMA programs, either under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or developing their hazard plans, or we might be able to fund local planning studies. But the bulk of the funds that we have go towards infrastructure projects. Those things can be like wastewater plants or improving the drainage so that there isn't flooding on streets or into neighborhoods. We can also help fund safe rooms or emergency shelters, those type of things that benefit the entire community. So we often get the question, who is eligible for these programs? And I'm going to really hone in on here homeowners and renters. So homeowners who are affected by a designated disaster, who live in one of the eligible counties, may be eligible for our programs. HUD does require that at least 70% of our program funds are to benefit low to moderate income households. So in the example of Hurricane Harvey, if a homeowner reimbursement program was approved by HUD, then the GLO may award CDBG DR funds or Community Development Block Grant funds for disaster recovery to reimburse these homeowners for out-of-pocket expenses for eligible repairs to their storm-damaged home. So what does this mean, right? So Congress does a federal appropriation. They give the money to HUD. HUD gives the money to us, here the state, to manage. Homeowners can apply and say, I paid out of my pocket. I took money from my 401k. I took a loan out. Or I used money into my savings to rebuild my house after a disaster. If they're in an eligible designated county, those homeowners may apply for us to reimburse them up to $50,000 for those funds out of pocket. Renters may also qualify. As I mentioned earlier, we do help with multifamily properties. We may restore them. We may build new, more resilient multifamily properties. And so there may be opportunities for renters to take advantage of these nice, new, renovated and or built resilient multifamily property structures to rent them. So looking at 2018 and 2019, there were several disaster events. They were declared by FEMA as federal events, and HUD decided to give us a lump sum of money for 2018 disasters and for 2019 events. So within those events, you can see on this table here, or on the map to the left, the counties that are eligible for applying for these events. The application period for this homeowner assistance or reimbursement program will launch on April 24th. So we ask that you wait just a few more days and you go to our website, recovery.texas.gov/HARP or HARP. That's what we're calling these programs. It's the Homeowner Assistance and Reimbursement Programs. And if you're in one of these eligible counties, you may be eligible for qualifying for one of our programs should you need assistance still in recovery. So again, in that 2018-2019 flooding events that took place in the valley, and also the 2019 tropical storm Imelda, you can see how we're allocating the funds based on the event, based on the breakdown of the counties, and how the funds are laying out. Oftentimes, HUD provides us a framework from which they want us to operate and designate funding. They call some areas what they determine as their most impacted, and then we're allowed to add what we believe are also some impacted areas. So the HUD most impacted tend to get more funding because HUD's giving us the money. So under the Homeowner Assistance and Reimbursement Program, or HARP, for 2018-2019, we may be able to help homeowners affected by reimbursing them up to that $50,000 if they had out-of-pocket expenses. We may be able to rehabilitate or reconstruct homes for them. And again, that launch date is April 24th. And we do encourage everyone to apply as soon as possible. Applications will be served on a first-come, first-served basis. And there will be a priority for our low to moderate income households, especially in that reimbursement program for those first 6 months of the application period. So on the topic of insurance versus disaster aid, now you know what might be available. We wanted to share with you the importance of insurance. And we are firm believers that insurance should always be first and always your top priority, right? So that should be the thing that you seek out first following a disaster event. So if you still have an unmet need after your insurance has already covered the damages to the extent that they'll cover, then yes, if there's still an unmet need, you may still be eligible for applying for a general land office program. The reimbursement program is a great example. Sometimes your insurance company will refund you money to rebuild your house, but maybe you're paying now out of pocket to elevate your house, to make it more hardy or resilient towards future events. If you spend that money out of pocket or you took a loan out and you need to pay that back, we may be able to reimburse you for some of those costs. Now, if you did not have insurance prior to the disaster, but were required to have insurance, like flood insurance or wind insurance, then your household might be deemed non-compliant or non-comp. That is a designation that the federal government or FEMA puts on a household because they do oversee the flood insurance program. So they know who was supposed to have it and who did not have it during the event. In that case, you may not be eligible for any other federal programs. That's why insurance is so important, because if you're going to seek disaster aid, yet you were required to have a specific type of insurance and didn't, you won't be eligible likely for those disaster aid programs. Now, let's say you have a disaster affect your house or your property, and you weren't required to have those special hazard insurances. But then later after the disaster, you're now required to because the flood maps have changed. You may be eligible for our programs because you were still compliant at the time. You weren't required back then to have it, but now you are. Now going forward, there may be a requirement for you to continue that, and that certainly will be something that we would require of anybody who receives assistance from us. We often get also questioned about short-term or temporary housing. And often your insurance will cover repairs or reconstruction to your home, but it may not cover where you can live while you're doing so. FEMA funds a short-term or temporary housing program called the Direct Assistance or Direct Housing Program. That is not funded in every disaster. We did have one during Hurricane Harvey, and actually FEMA asked our office, the GLO, to run that program because FEMA felt that we had the strength and the opportunity to do so, and also they needed the assistance in running that program. So FEMA funded the program, but we, the GLO, ran the programmatic side of it. FEMA determined the eligibility for that program, and at that time, you had to have over $17,000 in FEMA-determined loss to your house to be eligible for the program. They've shifted that formula a little bit, but they do have a formula for determining who's eligible. Households had to be compliant with that flood insurance program. So going back to insurance again, you have to be compliant with the requirements that are placed upon your property. And this program was eligible, or those eligible entities for this program were both homeowners and renters. So let's say you were living in a duplex and you rented one side, and that duplex flooded during an event. You might be eligible if the duplex was rendered unlivable after the event. You might be eligible for a temporary housing program that gives you time to live in a temporary space until you can find a new rental property. Or if you were a homeowner, we might place you in a mobile housing unit or a recreational, like an RV or travel trailer. There were also some options to put people in a commercial park into an RV or into a mobile manufactured housing unit. That is typically the case when your land can't hold an RV or an MHU, or maybe your homeowners association doesn't allow for those to be placed on your property. Then we try and look for options of ways to still provide you, if you're eligible, a temporary housing unit. The GLO might administer these type of programs in the future, or FEMA may decide to, but we are open to that option. And I just want to reiterate again, this doesn't come up every disaster. So even though insurance doesn't always cover temporary housing, although it may, it depends on your policy. And so do not expect that this is always going to come. This program was made available to the state of Texas during Hurricane Harvey. Prior to that, the 2016 floods, but only for 2 counties. And then prior to that, the 2011 wildfires throughout the state. So you can see that sometimes there's large gaps. Even though there were other federally declared disasters during those times, there are gaps in when this program is offered. So that's what I wanted to cover with you today. I do want to emphasize that it is important to have flood insurance, to have wind insurance if you're required, and also to carry your own homeowner's insurance. If you're a renter, it's also important to carry flood insurance if your property is required to have it. And your landlord has to inform you that you should have it. But I would also do my own due diligence and make sure that you're aware if your property is required to have flood insurance. And then also renters can always carry regular renters insurance, because it's important to cover your contents and to protect your assets. I'll be open for questions later after all the presentations. So thank you for your attention. Should you need to reach our office, our contact information is below. And I'm happy to share later my personal email address should anyone want to reach out to me directly. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you, Krista. Next up, we have 2 presenters from Federal Emergency Management Agency. First is Gilbert Gurin. He's a regional flood insurance liaison and has been working with FEMA since 2015. We also have Claudia Torres. Claudia Torres has been working with FEMA for 5 years, and she currently is working as a hazard mitigation insurance specialist. Thank you so much, and here is their presentation.
Good morning. My name is Gilbert Guidon. I am the Regional Flood Insurance Liaison for FEMA out of Region 6, and today I would like to talk to you a little bit about flooding. So the National Flood Insurance Program was created in 1968 to help mitigate and help prevent the peril of flooding. The definition of flooding by FEMA is a general and temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of 2 or more acres of dry land or 2 or more properties, at least of which one belongs to the insured, the owner. With that being said, if you take a look at my slide, I have a representation of a stool, 3-legged stool. Now, I think this is a great representation of the NFIP as a whole, because the NFIP is a program with different divisions, different branches. And when they work together, the stool is nice and stable, strong, and can support. So those legs consist of what we call risk identification or risk analysis branch. Now, they are the engineers. They're the ones who go out to the communities. They map floodplains. They combine in any information provided by the community. They work with other partners, cooperating technical partners such as flood control districts, and they try to provide a map, a flood insurance rate map, which is the best and most accurate, detailed information we have at that time. So when risk analysis is done, we hand it over to floodplain management. Now, floodplain management is really important because the community who joins the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, does voluntarily. It's a quid pro quo program, something for something. So by adopting and enforcing floodplain regulations to help them rebuild faster and protect property from flooding, FEMA offers affordable flood insurance and the availability for other types of grants. So by enforcing these regulations, the community has new construction that is built more resilient and protected from flooding. Now, the last leg is insurance, and insurance is overall protective for all of the legs. Without insurance, the peril of flooding can be astronomical. 1 inch of water can cost up to $25,000 to $26,000 in damage. Now, insurance it's a single peril policy. It's written specifically and only for the peril of flooding. It's not part of your standard homeowners insurance. This is something that would have to be purchased separately. And it provides you the peace of mind of being properly insured in case of a flooding event ever happens. So when all three of these legs work together, it is a great program. So why does flooding happen outside of high-risk areas? Okay, so I mentioned earlier that the community adopts and enforces floodplain regulations. Well, those regulations pertain to what is in the special flood hazard area identified by FEMA's flood insurance rate maps, right? So on a piece of paper, we're showing a line that can delineate the difference between being in what we call the special flood hazard area and being out. But in reality, that line on that piece of paper is not going to stop water. And the important part to remember is even though that you're inside of the special flood hazard area, you have higher regulations to build to. You have to bring in fill and elevate your lowest floor elevation, or you got to build on piers, columns, and posts. You have to have that lowest floor equal to the base elevation. Those regulations do not pertain to areas outside of the special flood hazard areas unless they are specifically adopted by the community's ordinance, which we call higher standards. It's important to remember that new land and community development can have a big impact on our maps. As I mentioned earlier, our firms are created with the best information available at that time, and I said that specifically because our firms are a snapshot of time, and over time things can change. So as soon as there's development happening, you have to start taking that into consideration. How is it going to impact your maps? And we also have experienced events that have been greater than what we call the 1% annual event. We used to call our flood maps the 100-year floodplain, but that caused a lot of confusion. People would say, well, I flooded last year, I'm not due for another flood for 99 years, and that's not how that works. So we call it a 1% annual event now. So you have a 1% annual event of flooding any given year, and that's the important part right there, any given year. Well, in some parts of the Region 6, we have exceeded that and had several 1% events happen in 1 year. So those type of events can lead to flooding outside of special flood hazard areas. It's important to remember, though, that line on the map is not going to stop the water from going from high-risk flood areas to low-risk flood areas. So using flood data, there's a lot of information available. A lot of it is user-friendly, very intuitive to use. We have one out there. It's called the FEMA's Estimated BFE Viewer. It's a great tool to get a general idea of what your BFE is. We have a lot of floodplain out there that have been identified by FEMA that we know it is an area of moderate to high risk, but for some reason or other, we cannot justify the cost of providing detailed information. A lot of the times, those will be rural areas, low population, low development type of construction. But the BFE viewer is a way to get detailed information so a community can provide a community-determined BFE for those who reside in what we call an unnumbered A zone. Very important because that can have a big impact not only on compliance, on how high that house has to be built in cases of new construction, and also on the overall premiums of flood insurance. So we also look underneath there, FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0. It's a big thing right now. Risk Rating 2.0 is a very large program FEMA has started to modernize the way we write flood insurance. Right now, the method, the legacy system is actually sound. So, you know, it's number wise, it does its jobs, but it's based off of data from the 70s. There's private sector data out there that can be used and is being used that we have decided to incorporate into our rating mechanism. And October 1, the premiums will be live for new business. And October 1, 2022, all remaining business will be incorporated into 2.0. Now, a lot of variables of 2.0 have not been released yet, but we do know it will have an impact on proximity to water, the type of construction for the house, flood loss history, and other variables that have not been released. So that's a big thing to read up on as well. Now, CoreLogic is a company who specializes in floodplain determinations, found 49% of properties outside of a special flood hazard area in Louisiana at a high to moderate risk of flooding. Remember, right now, our maps say that line is where the flooding the water is expected to be, but in reality, it can far exceed that. Now, let me hand this over to my colleague.
Thank you, Gil. So my name is Claudia Torres. I am your hazard mitigation insurance specialist out of FEMA's Texas Recovery Office, also known as the TRO. So, excuse me, a lot of times, you know, I get the question in my 10 disasters that I've supported from, you know, Puerto Rico to Alaska and in between all the states in the middle. I always get a lot of questions as far as disaster assistance and, you know, the difference between that and having flood insurance. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is that without flood insurance, most residents have to pay out of pocket or, you know, take out a loan to repair or replace damages. That's providing if it gets declared. So I know, for example, you know, let's look at what has taken place in Texas for 2017 in Harvey. If you had a flood insurance policy, the average claim payout was $118,000 versus disaster assistance was about $4,400. So as you can see, if you're a homeowner, which dollar amount is going to help you recover at a faster rate? Absolutely the one that has, you know, the flood insurance policy. Then we had, you know, Tropical Storm Imelda. The average claim for that one was $72,000 and the disaster assistance amount was $6,200. So again, it's like Gil said, that 1 inch of water over $25,000. And we know with these two particular events, people saw, you know, 3-4 feet of water. So you can only start accumulating that damage amount. I know just recently last year for Hannah, the average claim payout for that one was $27,000 if you had a flood insurance claim and 0 for disaster assistance. Why do I say 0? Unfortunately, that event was not declared. So keep in mind, not every natural event qualifies. You know, there are certain parameters that need to be met. So you have that safety net with that flood insurance. It doesn't matter if an event happens, you're going to have that peace of mind of having that flood insurance policy. A second point here, you want to get the amount of flood coverage that you can afford. Now, right now is the perfect time to start calling your agents, you know, start getting that quote, see what you can afford. You know, maybe you need to work around the coverage amount. Maybe the deductibles are going to be an option for you. And you want to also shop around because with the insurance, you know, experience matters. We might have agents that have been doing this for 20 years versus other ones that might have just had a couple of policies under their book of business, what we call. So get 2 or 3 quotes because with the National Flood Insurance Program, you should be getting the same quote, you know, give or take a couple of dollars, and just make sure that it's within range. Keep in mind that it's a 30-day waiting period. Also, with this policy, it doesn't work like your average, you know, homeowners policy or auto policy where you get to pay that on a monthly basis. It is a premium that has to be paid in full But the good thing is that it covers you for the full year. So you pay the full premium up front and you're covered for a full year. But you might, need to get additional documentation, and you want to get those things prepared as we come into hurricane season around the corner. The third thing that I wanted to focus here is that renters can get flood insurance too. I am alarmed when I am sitting with a survivor and they tell me, Claudia, I was not aware that I can get insurance for my personal belongings. On top of it, there's a lot of renters that I've spoken with that are outside of the special flood hazard, what we call a minimal flood risk, which is usually classified as a zone X. And if you're in a zone X, we do have preferred rates. You can start as low as $8,000 for a range of about $30 just as a starting rate. So it's important that you shop around. And also for my renters, I highly encourage you to go to MAP Service Center. That's msc.fema.gov. Put in the address that you're looking to either rent and see what flood zone it is. If you're renting a house, speak to that owner. Ask them if they've had flood losses before, because you want to be smart as far as where you are living. And in renters too, if you go into MAP Service Center and you see that complex is in a high-risk flood zone, you may want to think twice as far as where you're going to be living, or perhaps, don't get that first floor, go to the second floor higher so you can reduce your risk as far as your personal belongings. And, keep in mind every flood zone has some risk. I've heard this, Gil has mentioned it. Everyone lives in a flood risk. We all have flood risk. Where it rains, there is risk. How do you find out what that risk is? First thing first, you can visit our MAP Service Center. Again, it's msc.fema.gov. Go ahead and put any address in there, and you'll be able to look at that flood map. You'll have a legend on the right side corner, and it'll let you know if it's a high risk, low risk, or a moderate. And flood insurance is needed and available in all flood zones. You can get flood insurance as long as that particular structure meets, our definition for flood, which for the most part is just a matter of getting a free quote. Also, if you want to also talk to someone, we do have the FEMA Mapping and Information Exchange, also known as FIMAX. You can talk to them. They're mapping specialists. You can give them an address and they can take a look at that and help you understand what the flood zone is. And that phone number is 877 FEMA MAP, or it's 877-336-2627. So again, that 1 inch of water can cause $25,000 of damage to your home. And another thing that I wanted to touch on real quick is that on the disaster assistance, keep in mind there is no FEMA disaster assistance for business or owners of a rental or second vacation home. So what are you left to do? You want to insure. That's a lot of, I know there's a lot of people that rely on that second income. And if it's not properly insured, or you dismiss insurance, especially in Texas, you are going to be recovering much quicker with insurance. And also you can visit us on floodsmart.gov if you're wanting to just get general information. If you need help with reaching an agent that can help you get a quote, you can certainly visit us there. It has a lot of great resources and videos that you can take a look at your leisure. Well, that concludes our time. Thank you so much for your time. And Gail, you have any last minute comments?
Thank you for watching this video. Please don't underestimate the peril of flooding. It's the single most expensive form of disaster in the United States. Please protect your property. You worked hard for your house. By having flood insurance is a way to ensure that you can rebuild if an event ever happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was really great. We really appreciate that. Claudia and Gil, if you could provide some of those numbers in the chat to all panelists and all attendees that you talked about in your presentation, that would be really helpful. I was trying to quickly write them down, but I didn't catch them. So we have one more presentation. I'm just going to launch a poll right now and also a pop quiz question just to see how everyone's absorbing the information. So I'm going to launch that. Let's see. Okay. And give it a few minutes. Thank you for participating. And we are getting some great questions coming in through the Q&A chat. Thank you so much. Still plenty of time to submit your questions. We're going to have a good chunk of time during our Q&A portion to answer those questions. And here we go. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Walter.
Thank you. So I just want to make a quick note really quick that I wanted to thank you for all the questions that have been submitted. We have one more presentation before our Q&A session, so please feel free to submit more questions for our presenters. Next up, we have Yiling Chang. She is part of the Texas Water Development Board, and she will be talking about providing floodplain management support and education. Thank you, and here's the next presentation.
Hi, my name is Yiling Chan, and I'm here with the Texas Water Development Board to talk to you about flooding today. I serve as a state coordinator for the National Flood Insurance Program, and I'm also the manager of our community assistance team, which provides flood outreach throughout the state. Today, I'll be touching on a few of the programs that we have at the agency, and then I'll give you an overview of the community rating system and how it keeps folks safe from flooding in your community. As a state agency, the mission of the Texas Water Development Board is to lead the state's future in ensuring a secure water future for Texas and its citizens. We support the development of water plans and funding for water supply and infrastructure. However, we also play a role in flood planning, flood mapping, flood funding, and outreach throughout the state. So my group, the Community Assistance Program Group, serves as the state coordinating agency for the National Flood Insurance Program. We work as liaisons between FEMA and local governments to help them administer their floodplain management programs. We also have a flood grants team that administers FEMA's flood mitigation assistance grants, as well as some other funding sources. We've got flood mapping and modeling, where we're working to provide updated flood risk mapping throughout the state of Texas. And we also have our flood planning group, which is providing the first statewide and is it helping to administer the first regional-wide flood planning initiatives in the state of Texas. So just to give you a little bit of a background on the National Flood Insurance Program, the program is based on an agreement between local communities and the federal government. Local communities agree to adopt and enforce floodplain management guidelines to reduce flood risks in the special flood hazard area, also known as the 1% annual chance floodplain. In exchange, the federal government agrees to make flood insurance available to the community as a financial protection against flood losses. So in order to obtain federally subsidized flood insurance in your community has to be a member of the National Flood Insurance Program and enforce specific regulations. So our group comes in to help provide local floodplain administrators with the assistance needed to implement and enforce these regulations. We're here for technical assistance for any sort of questions about the regulations, permitting, and so forth. We help promote and maintain enrollment in the National Flood Insurance Program, and we're also here as a resource for communities to join the community rating system. So currently in the state of Texas, there are 1,258 communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And a community here is defined as either an incorporated city or an unincorporated county. And there are roughly about 200 or so communities that do not participate in the National Flood Insurance Program statewide. In addition to helping with the National Flood Insurance Program, maintaining and promoting that enrollment, we also provide training to local officials. We work, as I said, as a local liaison between FEMA and local cities and counties. We promote the community rating system, and then we're here for assistance with disaster preparation and recovery, primarily helping floodplain administrators with the next steps after a disaster to help them recover and permit and assess damages after a flood should happen. So here's our outreach contacts. We do have folks that are in regional offices throughout the state, and we're here both for local governments for assistance and the general public should you have a question about getting in touch with your floodplain administrator, helping to understand some of the regulations that exist, and things like that. So here's a map of our outreach contacts throughout the state and their contact information. In addition to the outreach that we do, we also have some grants that we administer throughout the agency. So we do administer FEMA's Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant. That is an annual grant that we administer to local communities, and they then administer that grant on behalf of individual homeowners. So we've got within the Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant Program, we do have planning and project grants. So those planning grants are to help update and develop the flood hazard component of a community's multi-hazard mitigation plan. But we also have the Flood Mitigation Assistance Project grants, and those are provided at several different kinds of cost shares depending on what kind of structure we're talking about. So in general, FEMA provides 75% of the funding, and the local governments have to provide 25% to implement these projects. But if the structure is what's considered a repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss structure, these grants can fund the project 90% with a 10% local cost share, or if it's severe repetitive loss, it'll be covered 100%. And these grants are here to help implement measures to reduce flood losses. They provide mitigation options for structures that are insurable under the National Flood Insurance Program. Some of these projects can include the acquisition of structures and real property, relocation or demolition of structures, dry flood proofing of non-residential or historic structures, elevating structures, doing some minor localized flood reduction projects, as well as implementing drainage projects. There are a wide variety of other funding mechanisms that we have at the state, both at the Texas Water Development Board and some other agencies as well. So I would recommend you check out the Texas Flood Information Clearinghouse. Here's the website here, texasfloodclearinghouse.org. This is a one-stop shop where you can check to see what funding exists and which agencies are the ones that can provide that funding. And so it covers a wide variety of grants and loans that exist. And it's a collaborative effort between the Texas Water Development Board, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and the Texas General Land Office. So I would advise you to go there if you're interested in learning more about the grant programs that might be available to you. In addition to our outreach and grant programs that we have at the agency, we also provide flood risk mapping data throughout the state. We produce what's called base level engineering data, which we work in conjunction with FEMA to produce. And we are going to have this information available statewide by 2024. We've recently updated our website with an interactive map that allows you to see when your watershed will have this data available. It's meant to be supplementary flood risk information that can go in conjunction with your flood insurance rate map. And for those areas that have approximate A zones where the base flood elevation hasn't been determined, this data will provide base flood elevation data that can be used to support that. Finally, at the agency, we also have our state and regional flood planning groups. This is a first of its kind statewide flood plan that was created in 2019 with the passage of SB 8. This requires a bottom-up watershed-based regional flood planning with public input. The Texas Water Development Board has designated flood planning regions, and we've designated the initial voting members of the groups. Those members are volunteers who represent various interest categories. Each flood planning group will have its own website where you'll be able to contact them and learn more about how to participate and stay informed. Some of the key tasks of the regional flood planning groups are to gather and analyze flood data, identify existing and future flood risks. Then they'll evaluate floodplain management practices and recommend strategies, evaluations, and projects that should be implemented to reduce flood risks. Once they take all of that information, they'll develop a regional flood plan. From those regional flood plans, we will then generate a statewide flood plan for the state. So moving on from the programs that we have at the agency, I do want to talk about, expand upon the National Flood Insurance Program and go into the community rating system, which is an additional program that FEMA provides. So just to give you a snapshot, in the state of Texas, the participation in the National Flood Insurance Program is voluntary, and communities are authorized to join the NFIP through the Texas Water Code section 16.3145. So currently, we've got 1,260 participating communities. Of these, there are about 1,480 in Texas, with about 85% of the communities participating. Some of the newly joined communities, as of the past several months, are the city of Megargel, City of Scotland, Valley View, Coupland, and Gordon. So those all recently joined, which means the community members that live in these areas are now able to receive subsidized flood insurance, which is required for any sort of federally backed mortgages. So then the community rating system is another program that's related to the National Flood Insurance Program. It's a voluntary program that encourages those communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program to exceed the basic standards. So what they do is, it's a point-based system based on a wide range of floodplain management activities. So depending on the level of participation and different initiatives and regulations that a community has adopted, communities can really receive a substantial reduction on flood insurance rate for homeowners. So while it's something that's implemented at the community level, it's something that will directly impact you as a homeowner by both reducing what you pay on your flood insurance premiums, as well as reducing the flood risk that you've got in your local area. So the communities that do participate in this program can see a reduction in insurance rates by increments of 5%, starting at a 5% reduction, going all the way up to 45%. So that's a pretty significant amount of savings that you can see there. So the overall goal of this program is to reduce and avoid flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, and foster comprehensive floodplain management. So it incentivizes, doing things that make communities safer, doing things that a lot of communities might already have in place, but it then quantifies and has the community put these together in a way that then allows them to have savings for their residents in turn. So the community rating system, as I said, is points-based, and so there's a series of activities that a community can get points for. So there's 4 main series. Within each of those series, there's different activities and elements within them. So it's a really thorough and well thought out program that really specifically itemizes and delineates all the different projects and initiatives and the ways that you can earn points for each of these. So there's the Series 300, which is public information. This includes public outreach projects, requiring elevation certificates, hazards disclosures that the community may have, providing flood protection information, and promoting flood insurance. So those are really public-facing initiatives. Then there's the Series 400, which are mapping regulations. So this incentivizes regulations that go above and beyond those minimum FEMA NFIP regulations. So some of them are open space preservation, requiring higher regulatory standards, such as building higher, requiring that buildings be built higher than that base flood elevation. Within this is also stormwater management. Then we've got the 500 series, which is flood damage reduction. So this includes floodplain management planning, the acquisition and relocation of flood-prone structures, flood protection, drainage system, and maintenance, which, as you remember, we already administer grants, such as the flood mitigation assistance grants, which communities can use to help them implement some of these. So some of the funding already exists and is out there for then communities to apply and be able to get reduced flood insurance premiums for. Finally, we've got Series 600, which is warning and response. So this includes flood warning and response, as well as some levee and dam safety initiatives. So as we spoke about, the savings can be realized in 5% increments. So a community starts out as a class 10. If you're a class 10, you haven't met the minimum amount of points to get any savings. From then there's a class 9, which saves 5%, class 8 saves 10%, and so forth. So the biggest amount of savings are going to be seen by those that are in the special flood hazard area or the 100-year floodplain. However, there is still premium discounts that can be realized by those who are not in the floodplain. And those are also called preferred risk policies. So those individuals who are not in a floodplain can still receive up to 10% savings on their flood insurance premiums. So here's a map displaying all of the communities that participate in the community rating system across the United States. So you can see they are pretty concentrated along the coast of the United States, but we definitely have some inland ones as well. There are several class communities that are in classes 1 through 4, which, if you'll remember, a class 1 community saves 45% on their flood insurance premiums. Currently, there aren't any in Texas. The lowest class that we have in the state is a class 5, which it receives discounts of 25%. But hopefully soon we'll have some class 4 and lower communities in the state. Here's a breakdown as to what that looks like currently throughout the United States as of October 1st, 2020. So you can see the bulk of communities that participate are class 7 or 8. And, you know, there's only one community that's a class 1 community, and I think it's somewhere out in California. Very few that, you know, are even 4 or lower. But there are a good amount of communities that do participate. Zooming in further, there are 70 communities that participate in the community rating system in Texas, which, if you'll remember, there's 1,260 communities that participate in the NFIP in the state. So there's definitely room to grow for communities that do participate. Policy holders in Texas save a total of $30 million a year annually. So that's a lot of savings. And individual policy owners have an average savings of $80 annually per policy. So this program not only implements practices that make the community safer from flooding, but then you then, as a flood insurance policy holder, save roughly $80 annually. There are 4 communities in the state of Texas that are a class 5, saving 25%. So those are Dallas, Grand Prairie, Houston, and League City. We're hoping for more communities to join the community rating system. If you are a local official, I'm always happy to talk to you about joining the program, what the application process looks like. It is a program that's free to join for communities. And we can always work with you to help submit the application materials. And if you're a homeowner who's interested, it might be worth calling your local floodplain administrator to see if your community does participate in the community rating system. And they can talk to you a little bit more about what kind of protections are already in place in your community and how you are saving on your flood insurance premiums. So I hope this has been informative. Feel free to ask me any questions. Here's my contact information here. Again, our group serves as outreach liaisons throughout the community. So if you do have any questions about local floodplain management, regulations, joining the community rating system, or even as a homeowner as to how you can protect yourself from flooding, feel free to reach out at my contact information here. Thanks.
I want to thank all of our presenters today. They did a really wonderful job. Before we go into the Q&A section, I want to introduce Kate DeGeneiro. She will be facilitating this process and we'll be reading out the questions that you guys have posted in the Q&A panel and some questions that we got by email before this meeting. Kate, please take it away.
Thank you, Walter. I do want to start with thanking Walter again for running the technical side of our show and getting us through all these presentations. So I am also a planning specialist with Texas Sea Grant, and I will be taking over the Q&A period. So if we could have all of the panelists turn on your videos, then we can go. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So a few housekeeping tips first. We've disabled the chat box for attendees. So I see that people have been putting questions in the Q&A box, which is great. You guys, all the attendees can read the questions in the Q&A box, but I'll also ask them aloud and get have the panelists have an opportunity to expand on their answers a little bit more. I also want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if you guys continue to put questions in the chat box, if they seem a little complicated and we're running out of time, then we can always follow up after the webinar. So yeah, that's all the housekeeping tips. So I'm going to start with one question that we got from the Google form that went out with the webinar announcements. So this person, he introduces the question by saying, it appears as though many local governments do not apply for mitigation grants to help their communities and residents become more resilient. How can insurance carriers, FEMA, and the GLO promote governments to apply for mitigation programs to help residents protect their properties and reduce insurance costs? Everybody can take a chance to answer that question if they'd like.
Kate, this is Krista, and I'm ready to jump in. So on the side of the General Land Office, we encourage all local jurisdictions to apply for the grants that we have available. We also make it achievable in that if a local jurisdiction is applying, let's say for hazard mitigation grant, and they're not accepted through FEMA, we've been able to, during the mitigation funds that had provided us to provide supplemental funds to support those jurisdictions that maybe didn't get the funding through FEMA, but they were able to get the funding through us. As he presented and mentioned, there's a group of us that meet from Texas Water Development Board, Texas Division of Emergency Management, and the General Land Office, and we partnered together to encourage jurisdictions to really exhaust all the potential resources out there, and that's how we started the Flood Information Clearinghouse as well. So jurisdictions aren't discouraged from applying for grants, but that they're actually encouraged to do so because we're trying to provide as much resources as possible. Our mitigation grants will also begin to cover some building code support, as well as some funding for jurisdictions that need to rewrite
their hazard mitigation plans, we are going to have funding available to get those plans updated. So hopefully that will encourage those jurisdictions because the financial hurdles may not be there as much.
Thank you, Krista.
I have a comment on that as well. Flood insurance is a big thing for us, but one of our main concerns are those structures that flood repeatedly. So we identify these structures as what's called repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss. And we share this data with the communities. Now, the communities are to tie these into their hazard mitigation plans. That way, when an event does happen, they have a plan available that they can submit for possible grant funding to help them mitigate these areas. We encourage communities to adopt this posture, but however, a lot of times mitigation projects are geared towards drainage, some type of area protection system such as levees. So it's a competitive nature. We want houses to be elevated and protected. At the same time, though, the community may have an alternative plan on using that grant money. But we provide this information to the communities to help them make informed decisions on what avenue they should proceed in on the grants.
Thank you, Gilbert. Okay, let's move on to another question. From the Q&A box, somebody asks, I think this is maybe related. Oh, okay, so is it hard for my small town to join the NFIP? Gilbert, you answered it, gave an answer, but I didn't know if you wanted to expand on that at all.
Yeah, I gave a little quick down and dirty answer. The same is the process to join the NFIP is the same throughout the country. You have to submit an application, a resolution, and an ordinance. Now, when you have a large community and they have an entire staff dedicated to providing information, it's not that big of a deal. But when you have a small community and the floodplain administrator is same as the chief of police, the same as the mail person, it can be daunting. The process to join doesn't require a lot of information. It just requires a commitment. However, the ordinance does have to be ratified. So whatever requirements are needed for a new law in a jurisdiction to be passed, such as any type of public speaking, engagements, such like that, they have to be adhered to before the ordinance can be ratified and passed. The workload to join an NFIP is not astronomical, but there is a workload involved. The NFIP is a voluntary program, is something for something. So the community not only has to adopt, but they have to enforce. And that means someone has to be assigned as the floodplain administrator to adhere to the ordinance that the community has agreed to adopt. So it's not a technical process and it's not a difficult process, but there is going to be work on the side of the community to join the NFIP. And Yi and her staff and me at the region and our compliance staff at the region are more than happy to help any community who is interested in joining the NFIP. They were always put on a fast track when they come through our office about joining the NFIP.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like Gil said, that we're here to help with that as well at the Texas Water Development Board. We can help with the application. There is some information that's needed, like the number of buildings that are in the floodplain, things like that. We can help with the application. We do have model ordinances, so we can help you get that language adopted. And then throughout the process, as you're learning, as the community's learning what requirements exist for permitting, we're here as that technical guidance. If you've got any questions, you can always call us and we can walk you through that.
Thank you both. So another question in the Q&A box is a floodplain management plan required to be a part of the NFIP? And Gilbert answered, a flood damage preventative ordinance has to be adopted and enforced to join the NFIP. And you just stated that again. But I wanted to do a follow-up question. What is the difference between a floodplain management plan and a flood damage ordinance?
We're just talking about different verbiage here. It can be called anything. At FEMA, we call it a model ordinance or flood damage preventive ordinance, but whatever the community wants to name it as they adopt it, that's up to the community.
It does have to be, a adopted regulations, whereas sometimes plans might be sort of guiding principles that a community should follow. This needs to be, legal requirements that the community is adopting. The sort of main or big picture item that's in the ordinance is that the community agrees to permit any development that exists in the floodplain. So that's going to be any structures that are built, mining, grading, dredging, anything like that. They would need a permit, and they need to ensure that those buildings are built appropriately.
Great, thank you. Another question from our Google form, and this, I noticed when you were giving your presentation, you talked about how many communities were in the NFIP and how many weren't. I think it was roughly 200 communities that weren't in the NFIP. So if a resident wants to get flood insurance, how do they get flood insurance if they're not if their community is not a part of the NFIP?
Yeah, so they're not going to be able to get flood insurance through an NFIP policy. There is private flood insurance that exists. However, it's not going to be federally subsidized by the government, and those rates may vary. So it does exist. But however, if that community is not in the NFIP, in addition to that federally backed flood insurance, they're missing out on disaster assistance and other components that they're not going to be able to get. So we always strongly encourage any communities to join, and we're here to help with that should you need it.
Is there a way for a resident to like push on their local officials, like, I really want to join the NFIP?
Yeah, it never hurts to reach out to your local officials. They are always very receptive of what their constituents' interests and needs are in the community. So I'd encourage y'all to do that.
Okay, thank you. We also had a write-in question for Dr. Nielsen Gammon. This person says, I have heard that they may extend the hurricane season to include May. Is that true? Is that a result of climate change?
Yeah, there's sort of been, I think, different discussions on that at the international level and the national level. Of course, there's no regulation that says when hurricanes are allowed to form or not allowed to form. So it's mainly a matter of what the purpose of declaring a hurricane season is. If the purpose is to get people into heightened awareness of the risk of hurricanes, which I think it is in most cases, you've got two competing influences. One is, well, gee, we've seen some storms form before June 1st, before we even start talking about hurricane preparedness. So we should start talking about it sooner. And then the counter argument is, most hurricanes are going to be in late August and September. So if we start talking about it in January, everybody forgets about it when they need to know about it. So ultimately, it's a question for social scientists and public safety officials to make that judgment on. As for climate change driving it, we are seeing sometimes temperatures certainly seeing sea surface temperatures warmer now than they used to be, and we have gotten a few storms recently earlier than before, but we actually over the long haul there's not a strong consensus that the number of hurricanes would actually increase over time. We see a bit of spreading of the season, which might be related to climate change, but with things that are so rare in the first place, it's pretty difficult to detect a reliable trend just in the data. So possible climate change connection of it, the jury's still out, but the main reasons for changing the season would be for public safety purposes. And that's also the main reason for not changing the season.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. So I think the last question in the queue, we have one more that's open. Okay. One of the questions that was asked and answered, and I just wanted to follow up on, is as a resident, how can I get involved in statewide flood planning efforts? So I think that we had the GLO talk about disaster recovery plans, and then FEMA and the Water Development Board, they have flood planning efforts. So maybe the both of you can address that question.
Sure, yeah, I'll start. So at the Texas Water Development Board, we do have those state and regional flood plans that are kicking off. And those were, the agency was charged with that just in the last legislative session. So it's a relatively new initiative. So what I'll do is I'll put the link to statewide flood planning on our website in the chat so that y'all can take a look. In that link, there will be a link to sign up for emails to find future communications. We do have public comment periods when we release our guidance documents and any other related plans that anybody can publicly comment on. We have already designated the voting members for those regions, and each of those regions has to have somebody representative of several different groups, you know, from the energy sector, from, you know, the hazard sector. And there was a position that was there for members of the public as well, but that's already happened and we've already selected those representatives. But there's always the potential that we could add more members. So the best way to stay informed would be to just keep up with our email distributions, and to also on that page, there's a link to future meetings that are out there as well. And so that's where you can attend those open meetings and see what's going on in your region.
I've actually attended a couple of meetings in my region too.
Nice.
Krista, do you want to? Yeah.
Sure. So the Texas General Land Office, when we receive the disaster recovery funds from HUD, we have to put our plan, what we call an action plan, up for public comment. And we have an obligation to respond to every single public comment up there. And that gets turned back into our action plan as well to HUD, so they get to see how we've responded. Some of the funding that we use is actually for flood studies, for other type of planning events and activities. And so making a comment on our action plans when they're submitted, sometimes we make amendments to those. Those are also up on our website for public comment. That is ways that we can adapt and look at how we're using our planning efforts to help the state out. Similar to Texas Water Development Board, we have our advisory committees. We did fill 2 advisory committees so far. However, we are potentially looking to add a 3rd committee if we get enough interest from the public. So that may be something that comes down the line in the future. And so please keep in touch with us via social media, but also through our website and the information that we have.
Awesome. Thank you both. And we just had one more person write in a question for Dr. Nielsen Gammon. Will future weather patterns change the floodplains in Texas?
Okay, would you like me to occupy the remaining 23 minutes of our time? Because yeah, the recent analysis of heavy rainfall intensity that was done by NOAA for the state of Texas that came out in 2018 has some substantial changes in the amount of 100-year rainfall amount, say the amount of rain you expect to have with 1% chance in 100 years. And the hydrologists and floodplain managers are going to take that data, run hydrologic simulations, and go through the whole process of new floodplain maps. The update has a lot more intensity of rainfall in a band stretching from southeast Texas across to Austin and San Antonio. So over the next few years, as the new floodplain maps are established, embedded, and so forth, we would expect to see an increase in the size of the 100-year floodplain in those particular areas. Over the longer haul, some of the work that I've done, which is consistent with what others have done, has shown that the overall intensity of heavy rain is increasing. It's gone up by somewhere around 10 to 15% over the past 50 or 60 years in terms of the magnitudes, and models project it should continue going up. Main reason for that is a warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor, so it can produce more rain, but you can also have changes in storm structures that are delivering the rain as well. The answer to your question, will climate change cause the floodplain to expand? They will certainly be driving them toward expansion. Of course, whether they actually expand depends on what flood mitigation measures are taken in the local communities. Historically, we actually haven't seen an increase in the amount of flooding because so far our improvements in flood protection have in many places kept up with what turns out to be an increased risk of heavy rainfall that's driving the flooding in the first place. But certainly that driver is on the way up and will continue going up.
And I'll just add to that the floodplain maps as we see them are static. They're a depiction of the conditions that were modeled at the time that they did those studies. And floodplains are always changing dependent on development in the area. Like Dr. Gammon said, any mitigation actions that are taking place. So that risk is always changing. And I'll add to that everyone does live in a floodplain. It's just a matter of what your risk is. Anywhere it rains, it can flood. But that risk is, not constant at all times.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions. Yeah, that's all of our questions.
Great. I wanted to thank everybody for coming today, and I wanted to let you guys know that we have our contact information up right here, and that you can contact us or any one of our speakers if you did not get your questions answered today, or if you would like some more in-depth answers. We also provide, as Texas Sea Grant and part of the CRC, resources to communities, especially low-capacity communities, helping them out with technical planning issues, floodplain management issues, or just need help getting in contact with someone in the state that could help you out. We are going to continue doing this video series in the future, and take note of when we're going to do it on our website and on our Facebook page, and we will provide links and times and dates for these new videos.